Hello, friends. Welcome to Islington Listens, wisdom from a community of faith that doesn't think the same, vote the same, or love the same, but we are trying our best to follow in the way of Jesus with compassion and hope.
This Sunday, we remember all those who said yes to service for their country and the spectrum of emotions involved: fear, curiosity, certainty, commitment, excitement, and courage. Episcopal Bishop of Washington, Mariann Edgar Budde, examines this in chapter 6 of her book, How We Learn to Be Brave. The chapter is entitled The Inevitable Letdown. As a part-time military chaplain serving with the 32 Signal Regiment, a primary reserve communications unit here in Toronto, my 4 years of service have provided me with insight into deeply human experiences of courage and of letdown. Bishop Budde describes what letdown can look like. After the rush of energy dissipates, the most predictable feeling is emptiness, as life in all its ambiguity snaps back into place. Old routines and unresolved issues assert themselves. Doubt rushes in. For a time, we lose our bearings, and we're tempted to retreat from the path of courage, or equally dangerous, to veer into overconfidence, with a temporary sense of invincibility blinding us to what is up ahead. This past April, I had the privilege of accompanying Etobicoke's Toronto Scottish Regiment on a ceremonial tasking to Western Europe. In the Dutch city of Meppel, we participated in commemorations of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands. But our primary task was a grave rededication for a previously unknown fallen Canadian soldier at a Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemetery in the Somme region of northern France. Through historical research, Company Sergeant Major Alexander McVean of the 75th Battalion Canadian Expeditionary Force was the one identified as lying in an unknown grave in Courcelette, France. Imagine the pride of his family and his community as he headed out to serve from Toronto, and the years of letdown, of not knowing what happened. Nearly 109 years after he fell in the battles of the Somme, surviving members of his family and representatives of his regiment gathered around a grave and the headstone that now bears his name. When we hear stories of Canadians working together at Vimy Ridge, it can be hard to think about disappointment. But the theme of the inevitable letdown resonates with the early experience of those Canadians who first signed up to serve in World War I. Ships of young Canadians landed in England with great excitement in the months after the start of the war. Young soldiers were eager for an adventure to support the British Empire. However, the letdown came as battalions lingered in England. They trained for months on the Salisbury Plain, most of it in terrible mud, as England had experienced one of its wettest winters in decades. This time of waiting was hard for Canadians who yearned to contribute and to make a difference. During this time, the work of chaplains was also challenging. They juggled their own personal letdowns after expecting to minister to troops on the front lines and ending up supporting frustrated soldiers. One chaplain even lied about the unit that he was serving so he could sneak on a boat to cross the channel even faster and get closer to the front. As these Canadians lingered in England, chaplains were tasked with monitoring the morality of the troops, as well as trying to offer encouragement and do the best they could to keep them out of trouble. They must have prayed this psalm for themselves, and they must have taught it to their troops at church parades on Sundays, offering strength and hope in the struggle and in the preparation to serve. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea. As people of faith, we believe that wherever we are, God is. God was with those who were waiting. God was with those in battle. God was with those who lost their lives there, and God was with those who returned. God was with those who experienced another element of the inevitable letdown, which Bishop Budde refers to as relational payback. She says, stepping out in courage affects the homeostasis of relationships and the communal structures upon which they depend. Even in our most loving relationships, we bear the cost of disruption of the patterns we've come to expect from one another. Navigating relational payback is part of the sacrifice experienced both in the past and the present by those who stay home and by those who have gone away, who have experienced something new and have come back changed. Today, military chaplains are involved in preparing the troops to reintegrate back into the routines at home after a domestic operation or a deployment overseas. Chaplains offer tools and tips for re-entry back into family systems. While there may be payback and times of inevitable letdown, it's the chaplain's proactive support for soldiers and their families that can help them recognize that payback is a normal part of returning home. In my own chaplain training and time away, one of my instructors gave me the image of returning home as if you're a gracious house guest. Instead of making assumptions about how a military family will be after an extended absence, one can act like a gracious house guest with a spirit of helpfulness and grace. Personally, for myself, I am away on a unit exercise for a full weekend each month and have been away from home for weeks at a time during my training these past 4 years. When I've had an all-consuming experience, I can forget what's gone on at home. So in order to manage the sense of payback, I try to return home with an intention of gratitude and a readiness for chores. Bishop Budde normalizes the realities of our lives when she describes the inevitable letdown as something to factor in even as we are still on the mountaintop. While the inevitable letdown is a reality of great experiences, how can we respond? She says letdowns are inevitable, but they do not have the final word unless we let them. So I'm curious today, are there times in your life when you've experienced payback and let down with those you share your life with? Would acting like a gracious house guest be helpful the next time you return home? As disciples of Jesus, scriptures can offer us a healing balm. The ending of Psalm 46 offers spiritual reassurance, and it offers comfort for our own letdowns. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. How can we pause? How can we be still? How can we deeply trust in God and in God's presence with us? During my own learning experiences in the Canadian Armed Forces, there are times when I have doubted my own physical ability to complete a task, or times when I've doubted my ability to know what the next procedural step forward should be. During these times of uncertainty, I've relied on the spiritual assurance from a different text, a line from Paul's letter to the Philippians: I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Seeking spiritual reassurance is not the only strategy that we can use as a way to respond to the inevitable letdown. As chaplains, we support the operational readiness of our units. Emotional readiness, physical readiness, but most importantly, spiritual readiness. And a key to this is resilience, being able to endure challenge and bounce back from failures. It's part of learning to be brave. Resilience can give us strength to respond to the inevitable letdown. When I'm having conversations with soldiers, I like to ask questions about what are some of their own memories of getting through challenges in the past. How can your experience of getting through challenging times strengthen you for this current situation? What do you remember about a previous experience to succeed in the current context? What got you through before, and can you use that to get through now? Another element of resilience that I have found personally helpful is finding strength from the previous experience of my own ancestors. During this week of remembrance, I think about my great-grandfather, who left his wife and family of 3 young girls, including a toddler named Nora, to go back overseas in 1915. I think about my great-uncle, who survived physical and mental injuries as a prisoner of war in Japan after defeat in the Battle of Hong Kong at Christmas in 1941. I am grateful that these ancestors returned home, even if they were scarred by physical and mental injuries. We can find resilience and courage in the stories of the ancestors of members of this community, shared in our Veterans Story Project, which I know Dave Lawton will proudly share about shortly. Those who served and those who continue to serve are people from different faith or spiritual traditions. Today, we honor those who have put themselves in harm's way for the safety of others, for peace in the world, and to defend the values of a country that they love. Beloved Canadian World War I chaplain, Canon Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Scott, wrote this poem shortly after his time in Ypres, Belgium in 1916. He entitled it "A Canadian." The glad and brave young heart had come across the sea. He'd longed to play his part in crushing tyranny. The mountains and plains of his beloved land were wine within his vein and gave him an iron hand. He scorned the thought of fear. He murmured not of pain. The calling was clear, the path of duty plain. Beneath the shower of lead, of poison and of fire, he charged and fought and bled, ablaze with one desire. O Canada, with pride look up and greet the morn, since of thy wounded side such breed of men is born. Learning to be brave was not just for those in the past, but for such a time as this. It matters not just in Ukraine or in Gaza, but for those right here in Canada. Service and remembrance is just not for those in the Canadian Armed Forces. and just not for our military families. It's for all of us who profess in our new creed that we are called to be the church, to seek justice and resist evil. It's for all of us who want a more just world, a peaceful nation, and communities of care and compassion. This requires courage, and it requires faith in action. And we're sustained by the knowledge of those who have prayed before us, and the God whose love never leaves us alone. God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea. May it be so. Amen.
Thanks for listening, friends. For other ways to connect, go to islingtonunited.org. May God's wisdom and love keep finding you.